Questions, we'll introduce our panel. Paul Green is from Harter, Secrest, and Emery. Paul is a partner and the privacy and data security practice group leader at Harter Secrest. Paul represents clients in a wide range of industries concerning all aspects of proactive preparation and risk management, including security and vulnerability assessments, policy and procedure review, breach response, planning and drills, as well as board and management education on cyber risk and privacy issues. Post-breach, Paul and his team provide a full array of reactive services, including breach coaching and response, crisis management and communication, internal and governmental investigations, breach notification, and potential litigation or regulatory action. Paul has been recognized as a certified information privacy professional in the United States and Europe, and certified information privacy manager and fellow of privacy, all designations from the International Association of Privacy Professionals. He is also a distinguished fellow of the Hahnemann Institute. Paul has been ranked by Chambers USA, America's leading lawyers in business since 2015, for his strong reputation and knowledge, especially in the field of complex commercial litigation. He publishes and presents internationally on privacy and information security issues. We're pleased to have Paul on our panel today. Bruce Cheney is from ArcticWolf. He is a senior pre-sales engineer. Bruce is a well-rounded cybersecurity leader, researcher, enthusiast, evangelist, and speaker. He is an expert at helping organizations identify and understand the real risks and threats of a cyber attack. With 25 plus years of IT experience and a strong and practical knowledge of technology from layer 1 through layer 7, Bruce can identify and help reduce cyber risks for organizations of all sizes, verticals, and geographies. He is a thought leader and expert in finding chinks in companies' armor and explaining how to fix them. He has the skills to deploy, train, and troubleshoot a myriad of technology solutions, as well as explain to organizations how to secure those solutions. He has years of experience in professional training on complex IT topics, so making sense of complex topics is right up his alley, allowing him to specialize in transferring knowledge and operational best practices to customer staff, ensuring post-implementation success. We're pleased to have Bruce here today as well. Patrick Shaw is from Docs Electronics. He is a certified information systems auditor. Patrick began at Docs in 2012 as a local area networking engineer and quickly advanced into the role of security auditor to meet the growing demand from organizations seeking first-in-class comprehensive security assessments. As a senior information systems auditor at Docs, Patrick has participated in hundreds of assessments covering administrative, technical, and physical controls. He is a certified information systems auditor and a CMMC registered practitioner. We are pleased to have Patrick in a leadership role at Docs Electronics and as part of our panel today. So as we started out with our invitations, gas prices, all-time high, nation-state threat actors, have crippled hundreds of corporations in recent high-profile breaches. We're at war with Russia. Not at war with Russia, I'm sorry. Russia is at war with Ukraine. We don't want to be at war with Russia. There's fears of retaliation. Our objective here today is to, answer your questions and position your organization to be better prepared to defend against and respond to cyber attacks, and to do so expeditiously. I'll ask our panelists for their opening remarks based on Wednesday's FBI announcement of the successful disruption of a botnet of thousands of devices controlled by the Russian government before it could do any harm. The bot network was built by Sandworm, allegedly a Russian government military intelligence agency. They had implemented a specific type of malware known as Cyclops Blink on thousands of WatchGuard Technologies Firebox devices, security appliances that are typically deployed in the small to medium-sized businesses. Sandworm strung them together to use their computing power in a way that would obfuscate who was really running the network and let them launch malware or orchestrate distributed denial of service attacks like those used in Ukraine. So let's get going. Paul, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, Ken and I were talking about that news story about the FBI and kind of taking down that bot network before we got up here. From my perspective, that's kind of cold comfort, right? If the FBI comes to you and says, "Hey, we took malware off your system," great. Well, that only begs the question of everything else. What does that mean for your organization? What does that mean for the data that you have, for your stakeholders, for others? What does it mean about your information security program? Have you, for example, assessed the risk of using something that may be an industry standard? I think back to the Kaseya breach last year, I guess, losing track if that was 20 or 21, where the bad guys are actually looking for the easiest mode of entry. They'll look for the managed service providers. They'll look for the hardware that you're deploying. And it's impossible for many of our organizations to even understand that risk, let alone assess that risk. So there's a level of residual risk that's out there, just given the landscape we're in, that you can't control for, but that will have effects on the back end. And we'll talk about some of those legal and regulatory effects later on. But that was my first thought when I read that story, is that, hey, great, FBI took some malware off your system, but that's only the tip of the iceberg in relation to the problems that can arise from a compromise.
Yeah, that one, when they said it was Sandworm, that was the big trigger that they're back. From a historical perspective, Sandworm, they did the Petya, Not Petya, WannaCry. When Maersk was locked up and had 45,000 computers around the globe locked with hundreds of ships stuck off the Jersey shore, full of containers, thousands of them just sitting there for months because of Sandworm, right? So they're tied to the Russian government, the GRU group, and the fact that they're back is interesting. It's very just the timing, right, with the things going on in Ukraine, and then the Conti group kind of having their little internal battles now, which then kind of leads, well, is Conti part of Sandworm, right? Is this all tied back to the Russian government? Worst case scenario for us is that it's just more attacks coming our way, right? And the fact that they broke up these thousands of botnets, it's how many more are out there? What like when SolarWinds happened or Kaseya, it's like these 0 days, these guys are out there, and how many are there? We find 1,000 and turn them off, but that's like one local network here. So very, very interesting time, to say the least. Sandworm's back. There's a great book on Sandworm. It's called Sandworm. If anybody wants it, catch up with me after here. I'll send you one. It's well worth the reporter followed them for like 5 years, tracked them right down, got there, said, here's who they are. And then the Russians just said, yeah, shut the door and walked away.
Yeah, so I mean, with that, at a compliancy and making sure that, your organization is looking at all those factors, right? There might have been some telltale signs that maybe something was in your environment, like a botnet. So that's why it's important to have controls that maybe could start tracking that, or some type of intelligence, or someone even looking at those logs, that might have deterred, basically, that from happening before the FBI stepped in. So I think it's very important to have that visibility on your network, even for the unknowns, right? To just see, again, kind of around least functionality. What does your network need to do from A to B, right? To do your business processes, and then identify anything that's maybe outside of that, right? So if there's something going on a different port, a different protocol, some software is calling home to a Russian or other exterior type of environment, it's good to have that visibility. So between different IT or softwares, or even just in-house IT, reviewing those logs of your firewalls, your access points, your switches, even down to servers and PCs, might give you that further visibility to deter basically a botnet or something to live in your network if it is starting to call home at certain times throughout the months that it might have been perpetrated into the environment. So that's always good to have that visibility overall.
Thank you. So I guess let's go next to, what do you see as some of the more notable trends and challenges that are facing organizations with respect to cybersecurity and privacy today? Bruce, you want to start with that one?
It's always the same story, right? Just organizations aren't ready. They're not prepared. Like Patrick was just saying, they don't have the right controls in place. They're not seeing everything. And then something happens, and now it's like, well, what do we do? Right? And that's where it's not time to to figure this out. And I'm going to give this to Paul. I mean, he's the incident response expert. I mean, but that's when I see it, when it happens, when we get the call that they were hit with ransomware or whatever, it's usually shambles. Like, we don't get the call if they were squared away, if they had everything in place. It probably doesn't happen if they had everything in place, but just organizations just aren't ready. I don't think people take the threat seriously. I don't think some businesses understand or think that they'll just recover, it'll be okay, and if it happens, it happens. I've got backups, but the impact, just to the trust of a business, public facing, can be horrible for somebody, right? People just don't do business with you anymore because they don't trust that you're protecting their information. People don't want to work for you anymore. Their employee data is leaked, right? And so it's just, they're just not prepared to handle it. Either of these guys.
But again, to his point, it's one of those things where it is good at a visibility. You'd rather be proactive than reactive. Because reactive, everyone's stressed out. No one knows maybe what to do is the next step. And again, you could be wasting hours upon days trying to understand what the threat was, what happened in the environment, and try to recoup, get things back online, or even doing incident response. Forensically figure out what actually happened. So it's good to have policies in place, right, to understand and maybe tabletop. In case of this happens, what would we do in this situation? How would we survive that time frame? And then that point, also on the flip side, do a risk analysis, right? How long can we be down for? How much money can we lose before we're not a company anymore, right? And that's a scary thought, right? No one wants to think about that. But again, these threats are real. I mean, again, the FBI just found all those botnets. If those went live, that could have been hundreds of companies looking at that same scope of what are we going to do? So it's good to know ahead of time what those maybe unknowns might be, right? And okay, maybe if server goes down, okay, we lose data. So between disaster recovery, incident response, it's good to have a good foot forward. So that way you have a path forward in those circumstances, because it's always going to be unknown to them. But at least you have, again, a good step forward.
Well, believe it or not, I want to say something positive. With a session title like War and Cyberwar, it's hard not to just focus on the fear and the risk that's out there. It is really unfair for many organizations from a legal regulatory standpoint, because the regulators and the legislators are just getting the message. Here in the U.S., forever we had kind of industry-based regulation of privacy and security, healthcare, financial institutions, et cetera. Now the shoe's dropping for the rest of us. If you have employees, if you have a single social security number in New York, you're regulated. So we're all regulated in some fashion. I think the good news is the fact that so few people are actually getting it, that if you spend the time and effort to get your house at least somewhat in order, you're going to be ahead of the rest. And it's a great value proposition for your employees internally, and I'll talk about that in a second, for your customers, for your reputation generally. So it doesn't take much to make progress in this space, and that progress really is a wonderful value proposition. It can set you apart. I guess is the old adage, you don't have to be faster than the bear, just faster than the other person running from the bear. And that really is the scenario. So I talked about employees, and here's the thing to keep in mind with employees. From an incident response standpoint, regardless of the incident, whether it's ransomware or some other kind of attack, or even just a data leak, there are two questions that we get from employees. And the first one is always, what about my data? Right? If your systems are locked up and you can't get your product out and the company's about to fail, their first question, and probably rightfully so, what about my data? Do I have to go get credit monitoring? Do I need to change my banking credentials, et cetera? But the good news is the second question is usually, how can we help? People want to do the right things. Employees want to make sure the organization can rebound from this. They want a job tomorrow, so they want to be able to come back to work to an organization that's working. So leveraging thinking like that, leveraging, empowering people to make the right decisions, I think that's kind of the good news in this. There's a lot of area where we can make headway, and making a little headway can count quite a bit.
So let's pivot a little bit, and since we're already talking about being prepared for incidents and incident response, maybe we could, get three different viewpoints on, how do I build an incident response plan? What are the important components of it. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? It's pretty broad. We'll start with Paul.
I'll start there.
Yeah.
Don't steal somebody else's plan. A very easy place to find incident response plans is with higher education institutions. Many of the public ones, as a matter of policy, have to have them listed. I don't know why, but people steal Purdue's incident response plan quite a bit. I've seen manufacturing companies, I've seen healthcare companies with the Purdue incident response plan still referencing students, still referencing Purdue, right? They kind of copied it from the web and you give it to management. Look, we have an incident response plan, great. Okay, well, that incident response plan isn't going to serve you well. The other thing is, if you have one, it's got to be a living, breathing document. It can't be up on a shelf. We had one organization, and we got through a terrible ransomware event with the organization. And when we close out an incident, we'll always have our post-incident recommendations. And number one recommendation, this is quite often our number one recommendation, you need to either adopt or revise your incident response plan. Always a good idea. When you go through an incident, that's testing, it's pressure testing your incident response plan. Figure out where you need to review it, where you need to revise it. Well, we told this organization you need one, and then they said, oh, no, hold on, we have one. It's up there. And the head of IT pointed to the shelf behind him, and there was a red binder on top of the shelf that had their BCDR, this was pre-pandemic, but pandemic plan in there. And the incident response plan was in that red binder. He was the only one who knew it was there. And we just gone through the incident and we hadn't referenced the plan once. So don't copy the plan, don't ignore the plan. And probably the best way to start is to run through a mock incident. Whether you have a plan or not, tabletops are fun in my kind of twisted view of the world, I guess. They are actually very fun. Getting an organization together and running through the crazy scenarios that actually happen in real life in incidents. It can bring an organization together. It's really the best way to get management's attention. But if you have someone from management at the table and you're running through one of the crazy scenarios we'll talk about probably in a minute, it can really bring the issue into kind of crystal clear focus. And then if you don't have a plan, you run the tabletop, well, you know where to build the plan. Of course, you need to work with somebody who's done it before to get the right structure to it. But don't wait to kind of run through a mock incident. It's very important for an organization that can build some very important skills.
And you do fire drills, active shooter drills, you do all that stuff, incident, that's just part of the package of all that stuff today. And if you're sitting out there and you're thinking like, ooh, just ask somebody for help, right? Reach out to these guys, reach out to this guy, find somebody that knows how to do this stuff and they will help you. Right? As you can see, we all love to talk about this stuff. We're all passionate. So if you don't know where to start, think, maybe I need to follow a framework. Let me look at the NIST frameworks. Just go and ask for help. Find somebody that does that. Just like your business, we come to you to do whatever widgets and gadgets and whatever services or whatever, because that's what you do. Find somebody that does that stuff and let them help you. Because when it does happen, it's bad. I mean, if you don't have a plan, and the plan needs to be comprehensive. So you can't just copy it and go. It might not have out of band communication. Right? I have a friend right now dealing with an incident in Switzerland and their phone systems are down and their servers are down and their email is down, everything is down, and they're trying to text back and forth from Syracuse to Switzerland. That's their main line of communication right now in this thing because they didn't think, how are we going to do this? 2 Gmail accounts, or something that simple could help that, right? So now it's hindsight's always 2020. And move forward, but you've got to have the plan, you got to practice it, and if you don't know what you're doing with it, ask somebody to help you. Find the people that do it.
Yeah, you got to expect the unexpected, right? Because at one given time could be a technology that goes down, could be personnel, insider threat. I mean, they can range upon what could be a part of the incident response, but again, having a customized incident response directly for your organization is going to help everyone keep everyone on the rails, right? You don't want people to be reactive, stressed out, emotional, and doing the wrong things, restoring things, turning things on, calling the wrong people. Again, you want a very focused way forward, right? Because the more focused you are, again, like we talked about earlier, the reactive and, every minute is $1 for the company if it goes down, right? So the longer you are spinning your wheels to try to understand what's going on or how to find a path forward, the more time that your business is rebounding, right? You want to have that plan so that way the organization can tabletop, it can, foresee if communications go down, if servers go down, individuals go down, even, for redundancies that, if the CFO leaves tomorrow, what are we going to do? So it can vary range as far as into other areas of your organization, but to get the plan in place and the budgetary dollars to do those tabletops really will pay off in the end and to keep those valid. So another thing is training, right? So if you don't do training in your organization now, for, basically incident response or other things of that nature, again, your employees are only going to follow what they've maybe done in their previous job roles. So again, that might not align specifically to the job that they're doing today. So that's why it's so crucial, again, for your organization to push and make sure that training is appropriate, right, to what you want your employees to do at the dependencies and their hierarchy level, to making sure that it's as successful as it can be, even in a bad situation.
I'd like to ask Paul a question. So I sat on an incident and they had incident response policies planned. We did tabletop exercises. But the one thing that we missed in it, looking back after the fact, was how did we communicate to the employees when it was happening? Because when we were in the war room and the FBI rolled up, and, of course, the one guy's got the badge out, he's got the suit and the gun, he's, it's like, oh, here's the FBI, and when we're trying to keep it kind of hush-hush here, but we didn't have a plan on how to get it out to the users, right? They knew there was no internet, they knew, and there was not even, it was a containment, so there was no ransomware or anything like that, but because it was a financially regulated company, they had to go through the exercise of that. But what do you see for a plan to communicate to employees, and are there rules? Do I need to? I mean, I would think you don't want them to know, but they might know and put it on LinkedIn or, hey, FBI's here. FBI guy are here.
Yeah, it's not just, so quick quiz, can we spot the attorney on the panel here? So when I walk in, people usually, I should probably dress in civvies when I walk to a client during an incident, because when I walk in, people are asking, right? What the heck is the guy with the suit doing on the shop floor? Or, over there talking to the head of IT or whoever it is, when I've never seen a guy in a suit here before. Internal messaging is key, because internal messaging almost immediately becomes external messaging. I talked about a couple of the crazy scenarios, talking about ransomware generally. You all may be aware, ransomware is a service. The big organizations are getting footholds in other organizations and selling that compromise and selling really ransomware at the flip of a switch. For the ransomware as a service scenarios, we've seen much more active intervention by the attacker to get paid. Like, for example, taking someone's cell phone number out of their email signature block and calling an employee and reading their social security number over the phone and saying, tell your boss to pay up. How do you deal with that situation? So I'll tell you how. You plan for it. You know that things like that can happen, and you think about organizationally, how will we handle it? Every organization is going to be different. And I'll tell you one thing that we see here, certainly in our market, smaller, more agile organizations can often do it better, because you'll have a CFO that wears 5 hats and knows how to really get things done within an organization, or an HR person who has their finger really on the culture and the messaging of the organization. So thinking about how you interact with your employees is absolutely key. Realizing that there's going to be confusion, there's going to be social media as soon as something goes down. And it is a balance between message control, making sure that only the people who need to know about the incident, or at least know about the details of the incident, and then communicating to others. Are they going to buy it when you tell them, oh, it's a system outage and we're working on it? Are they going to really believe you? Those organizations that have regular system outages, we've seen that work in their favor. People thought, oh, that system's down again. That happens all the time. So there are a lot of different considerations to keep in mind, but you need to think about it in the front end and really plan for that. So
as a follow-on to that from the virtual participants, can you touch on what a proper run book would contain? We've hit on some of those around, what's the components of an incident response plan. We talked about internal messaging, backup communications, having a plan, doing tabletop exercises. Pat talked about training people, but what's missing from that plan or from that run book?
So when we talk about a run book, I'll talk first because I got the least to say on this. That's where the technical rubber hits the road, at least in my view, in an incident response plan. Your incident response plan shouldn't be more than 15 pages. A human being, not a technical person, should be able to read it. It's the real audience is management and potentially a regulator, right? If it's not readily understandable, it's not doing the right work. The actual run book of do this with that system and check this and inform this person or take this technical step, that's in my view what needs to be in a run book, so that the technical team knows exactly what to do. If that stuff's in the plan, if the CFO or whoever it is reading that plan, their eyes are going to glaze over. They're not going to understand a thing that technical language says. So the plan needs to be broader. Run books are where the technical magic happens, in my view.
Yeah, and if it's, again, that's what we do at ArcticWolf, right? We're watching everything. When something happens, we have the plan in place, we're ready to react, and we're helping our customers all along the way, all along the journey, making sure that that run book is there, an understanding, right? You need to have, an understanding of all of your assets. Many times, we see things where the breach happened because that old Citrix server was sitting out there. Or, we had that old VPN still up that we forgot about, right? So, being able to see everything and look at it and then have that plan in place. So when it happens, you're ready to go. But to build that plan, you have to be working on it, right? Things are constantly changing. We're always procuring new stuff. So it just needs to be updated regularly. It needs to be communicated. It needs to really just be part of the normal business process, right? Because the risk is real, especially here in New York State, right? I mean, if you look at Texas, California, New York State, maybe throw Florida in, we're taking the brunt of the damage, especially now with the landscape that we're in.
Yeah, and again, with that run book, I mean, it could even go down to the technical, prowess of, password complexity, into how is everyone going to authenticate into the network? It could be how are admins going to maintain different systems. So again, it can go very detailed as far as what the organization should be and basically adhering to in a very granular sense across the whole IT infrastructure, employee handbook of what the employees are needing to be on the hook for, understanding all those things. But I think what we touched upon earlier is that you can formulate all those plans, right? But if it's up on the shelf, it's not going to do anyone any good, right? So that's another thing of communication. I would say maybe quarterly or semi-annually, going over that, maybe even briefly over some sections of that, or maybe some areas that you need to or have updated of, hey, we got this new system, we got this new appliance, these, individuals need to know, these changes that we're making in our policy sets. Because that way, at least, the common knowledge is then known amongst everyone. If only 2 people know and there's a, organization of 100 people, it's not going to do very well if there is a situation, or again, if things are needed to be enforced, changed, modified, that the right people are going to understand and know what to do next for those different policy sets that you're going to create for them.
Ken, I've got one run book comment. So the problem, if you don't have any technical run books in relation to incident response, it's a very granular technical issue, but in my view, probably one of the best things you can determine is when to pull the plug. Right? I can't tell you how many organizations I've gone into, say there's a ransomware attack, and they don't have the decision process documented as to who's got authority to disconnect from the internet, how to do it, when to do it, what that's going to affect. Tabletops are a great exercise for that because, for example, if you're head of security and you don't feel you have the right authority yet, or you don't know what the authority is, you get to ask the other people at the table, okay, well, I'm going to pull the plug in this hypothetical scenario. Are you all okay with that? So thinking about that, that's going to serve an organization very well because quite often you do need to pull the plug to stop the bleeding.
Yeah, and if you do it in the wrong sequence, obviously being more on the IT side of this, if someone runs in the server room and flips a switch, again, data could be lost, configuration lost. You could be, someone that thought there was an actual incident, maybe there really wasn't. Maybe it was a blip in the system and someone, haphazardly went in there and shut things off. So again, separation of duties and making sure those policies are also in there of chain of command. Okay, well, instead of Susie in HR, if anything happens, just go in the server room and figure it out. Susie might just start ripping things out or turning things off, in a maybe quantifiable problem situation. So yeah, again, just making sure people are aware of what's going on, making sure that the right people are doing the right processes to making sure that a bad situation doesn't compound on itself if there is something going on.
I've seen the argument in the war room, I'll call it discussion,
Yeah.
about whether we should pull this, pull the plug or not, and do it. And, well, now our customers can't, file claims, and now we can't get email, and we can't, and with things in the cloud today, it takes a little bit of that burden when you, versus like in-house Exchange servers. But, when you pull the plug, right? You're shutting the business down, and that's, so that's you have to discuss it, you have to talk about it, you have to figure out when is the time, what does our board look like? If we had escalation boards, if this happens, what are we gonna do? And when is it okay? We all agree, and then now we can hold each other accountable.
And at that point, if they're after, we got notified if we have customers involved in that situation. So again, instead of you getting hammered, you're trying to figure out, our systems are down. Now we're getting hundreds of calls from our customers. What's going on? I can't get into my bank account or into my suite that that you guys are providing. So it's always good to go as far as you can to understand if this happens, X, Y, and Z, as far as a domino effect, what could really be involved, and to foresee what you can do as far as, okay, well, if this does happen, these departments will be, taking care of customer service. These departments will be working on the infrastructure, getting it back up. So again, you can get very verbose with it, but the more verbose and understanding of what can happen when will help you again to foresee, again, these circumstances.
So I want to give Arent a chance to run the poll for the first question set around incident response plans, and then I'll share I'll try and combine the results in my head for those here, as well as the ones that answer virtually. But just real quick, from each of your perspectives, how often do you run across organizations that actually have an incident response plan? That we'll start with you.
I would say, probably 30 to 40% of the time. Again, I think, we work with, large to medium to small businesses. And, I think people maybe don't take the time or effort to think, they're in their situation of, I need to get my job done. There might not be looking at the proactive side of doing policies and understand, what we need to do. So, it might be just something unknown that the organization doesn't even know that they need to do or understand that, situation. Or just don't have the time or budget, right? We need to work, we're running, basically behind on all of our processes. We don't have time to do it. Well, again, I think in the news, when we've been talking about Russia and everything else, might bring that to light of maybe we do need to take a minute or two to delineate maybe some of what we're doing into that time. So that way, again, you're buying time, ahead of a situation rather than, again, eating that time when you're in the thick of that. And then, again, then your systems are down. Then it's really, a struggle.
30 to 50%.
Okay, so that was pretty close, right?
If I'm talking to them, they probably didn't have an incident response plan, right? That's why we're.
So
let's-
5%?
We have to just stop it. We've got to just prevent it from happening and beyond. But yeah, if we get to the point where I'm talking with them, then there's a good chance that things got out of hand.
So mentally combining the results, close to 65% of the people actually, everybody combined, have an incident response plan, which is great. About half of you actually have an attorney that's ready to step in and offer advice. And about 40% overall actually have somebody who can help with communications, which again, we pointed out was something that was important. The other thing that I've heard and that's handy to have is if you can find someone who's been through a breach before, that you can talk to through the breach to help you with some of the more difficult decisions. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Breach coach.
Yeah,
There you go.
Breach coach.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to a question that came in earlier before we got off on this tangent, and probably more for you, Bruce. The question is, reviewing logs is a good point, but I found logs to be unwieldy, difficult to sort through, especially Windows logs. Reviewing them can be mind-numbing. Are there any tools available to help obtain the logs?
So yes, well, not a tool, but a service, right? ArcticWolf, that's what we do, right? We know companies have that problem. We know that tools get beat. We know that it's a struggle to, to try to collect all that logs and all the telemetry and correlate all the events and figure out what's going on. If you can't get your own internal SOC or your own internal security team to get you that 24/7, eyes on glass looking at this stuff from an expert perspective, then you need to outsource it. You need to go find somebody that can help you get there and take you, through the journey. And it's just, it's a whole process, right? It's that 10,000-foot view of everything, from the firewalls and the endpoints and the servers and the cloud, and you just have to have a partner, that can help take you through that.
And logs can increase your risk, right? So how long do you keep your logs? Is the default 30 days, 60 days? You need to assess as an organization the potential for compromise and use that to determine how long you need to keep your logs. Why? Because regulators care. If you have an incident that was latent for 6 months before it deployed and it ended up being really bad, the regulator is going to ask, well, why didn't you have 6 months of logs? Well, we went the default 60 days. That's what our vendors told us. That's what we thought was okay. Well, your incident just proved the negative there, proved the need for longer logs. And the regulators don't really care. Well, first of all, they're not technologists in the first instance. So they don't really care if it's necessarily reasonable to keep logs for 6 months or 2 years or whatever it is. Your incident can, again, prove the need to keep logs longer. So we see that quite often. It can, sometimes not having logs is quote unquote a blessing in disguise, because you may not know how bad it actually was. But again, if it's bad enough and a regulator pays attention, they're going to look at that lack of visibility and hold it against you.
And again, to your point, it's good to have the logs, right, that are coming in, but you could have 5 years of logs, but if no one's really actually looking at it or understanding logs, it's good, after the fact of, okay, well, here's a cookie crumb trail of what occurred. But really, a lot of the regulations now want not real time, but they want due diligence for any type of response, right? They don't want Johnny the intern to look at the logs on a Friday, and maybe discover that someone's knocking on the firewall causing issues. They want it probably within the hour or maybe thereafter, of someone going, hey, an hour ago I'm seeing this weird traffic going on. We need to do something, and now turn that off, turn a port off. Basically do it, maybe jump into a small incident response at that point. So again, it is good to have the logs, but also to have the response, which again, ArcticWolf could help with that as well.
And it's funny. I knew that Paul was going to say that, right? If I don't have the logs, I don't know what happened. We don't have any of the logs, right? But when you have all the logs and something happens like a SolarWinds, and you think, wow, this might have been happening for years. When you have the logs, you can kind of go back and replay all those indicators of compromise and look and see, oops, they were here 14 months ago, and then start looking to see, was anything stolen and anything along those lines. So yeah, but your regulations and in your compliance typically is going to, dictate, how long you need to keep them for your healthcare or
So, to be clear, dumping your logs is not an incident response plan.
right.
So a follow-on question, you seem to be really interested in incident response. What's the difference between an incident response plan and a DR plan, and can a DR plan encompass an incident response plan?
No, I'm the second.
Okay.
But they are related because an incident can be a disaster, right? The DR plan is there to build resiliency in the organization, to build continuity in the organization, and that is its own discipline in and of itself. There are aspects of BCDR that are important to keep in mind in relation to an incident, but really keep in mind what I was saying before about the audiences for an incident response plan: management and a regulator. So you talked about framework. In this 861, the incident response framework, there are 5 major steps there. Your incident response plan should look like that. Why? That's the framework that regulators know. They don't want to see an incident response plan that's Appendix C to your disaster recovery plan. And if it's Exhibit C, no one's ever going to look at it. So that needs to be freestanding. It's its own specific tool. But for example, the problem I see is organizations that have an incident response plan, or the beginnings of an incident response plan, but haven't thought about how an incident can play into their business continuity and disaster recovery plan. So when I asked them, okay, what are your downtime procedures? If your electricity went out, what would you be doing? Do you have a pen and paper way to do business? And they've never thought of that in relation to an incident. So making that connection is key, but they are different.
Yeah, disaster recovery and business continuity are separate, right? They're related, but, you know, the water's off in the building, you know, what do we do? You know, there's no power, what do we do versus being able to just recover?
Same sentiment, you know, again, they are separately needed. They do work hand in hand to kind of cover both sides of that coin. But yeah, you just make sure you have both of them that, you know, basically will, you know, work together properly in your organization.
So I'm going to ask Aaron to run the multi-factor authentication question for the audience virtually, and I have the answers obviously for this. But we were in a seminar yesterday, Pat, talking to PCI, DSS, and multi-factor authentication comes into play there in some new regulations, and we were talking about it before. Just wondering, what are your take? What do you see? Do organizations really embrace that? Are they lagging behind in using multi-factor authentication? What do you think drives that?
I guess I'll go. So for the most part, when we, you know, look at our organization, you know, I'm going to say for what we've seen over the last, you know, several years that, you know, it was a lot less a couple of years ago, a little bit more so now, but a lot of organizations, you know, they think, oh, we're not a bank, you know, we don't need to worry about it, you know, we're fine. Or again, there might be also some inner workings with employees. Maybe they know that, you know, again, the employees are going to fight us on this, right? So ultimately, you know, I think it is to, you know, definitely look into multi-factor because it is a very, it's a very good tool and control to use to really mitigate a lot of, you know, password breaches that you see in the wild. And, you know, basically someone to come in and use those passwords to get outright access, you know, without any other factor. But yeah, I would say, you know, there's it's still a trend of continuing to make sure it's happening and people are getting it in their environment, but I think people are still lagging behind even in today's age.
I was hoping that wasn't going to be the answer. I mean, we see everybody has MFA. And
I wish it was the case.
And I
really wish it was.
I sit at conferences and listen to people say this year my plan is to get MFA. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? Come on, you know. But I mean, if you, that it's on mandatory. And you know what? Here's my tip of the day: start thinking about getting rid of the push. Don't just let them say, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Maybe a pain, but if I go through the work and have to type the, you know, whatever the pin is, but it happens where people will be in the middle of one of these and my phone's buzzing and I was finally, I just hit it and then boom, and they're in and we see $45 million transferred and a business email compromise. And so getting rid of the push and forcing them to actually just take the extra 10 seconds to do it is, we're seeing a lot of that happening, a lot of that being talked about.
So we all know what the MF and MFA stands for, right? It's a swear word that people say when you tell them they've got to implement multi-factor authentication. It's also what you hear security professionals say when you tell them you don't have MFA. Right? So there's more of it. Certainly, folks are getting better. I'll tell you the cost of not having MFA. Go after this conference, go look up a company called IMED. They are a kind of optical insurance company, so eye insurance, vision insurance. And they had a email compromise, simple phishing compromise. No proof of exfiltration because they didn't have logs sufficient to show whether or not there was exfiltration or not. They probably had an E3 license, not the E5 license, so they couldn't see forensically what happened in Office 365. They had a spreadsheet, probably more than one spreadsheet, with quite a number of social security numbers in it, $600,000, fine from the Attorney General's office. And that doesn't account for what they paid their attorneys, what they paid their security company, et cetera. So if you're looking for leverage to get MFA implemented in your organization, go download the IMED settlement from the AG's office, take that to whoever's writing the checks in your organization and tell them it will cost $600,000 if we have an incident. And by the way, if you don't have MFA, the compromise is baked into your email system already, and you all know that. But it's really, we haven't seen a situation where folks have not had MFA in place and not had some kind of
Yeah, a lot of regulations are already enforcing it. So again, DoD contractors, PCI is even looking into doing it. I'm sure HIPAA's right around those as well. So, again, there's no reason not to. I mean, it is an investment, right? There is, tokens, soft and hard tokens that you can use to help, facilitate and make it comfortable for people that may not have a cell phone or smartphone. So, I mean, the entry of actually doing it maybe from past years is much more viable today and is much at a cheaper cost. So there's really no reason not to. Again, looking at the cost difference of, well, let's implement this for X amount of dollars versus a possible breach that could, come from that, not having it, really kind of sets the way of maybe the management of realizing that it might be, again, a business trend that everyone should be following, so that way they can have much more secure password as well as authentication in their environment.
So the results are in. Overwhelmingly, about 85% of the people in our seminar are using multi-factor authentication.
Good.
One question that came in associated with that is it's the most basic thing that you can do, but even companies like Oxa that sell MFA get breached. Can you comment on how to be more proactive? What's more than just the minimum of having an MFA solution?
I just assume that the tools are going to get beat, even with MFA. A user's going to make a mistake, and even opening an email and getting credentials, or getting internal access to a machine, a user accepting an MFA. I mean, just assume the tools are going to get beat. The bad guys are good; they're figuring ways out, to get in, and just be ready to detect, be ready to respond, have a plan.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of frameworks look at that, right? That's why regulations exist, because again, there could be a bad software situation that could happen, right? That companies get breached all the time, data flows down, or situations then occur to subsequent companies. So that's why there's other controls in place of isolating with other controls, softwares, and hardware sets. So that way the impact is less, right? So it's not a win-all that, hey, if we have multi-factor and we got into your organization, that we're going to be able to run the roost, right? So that's, again, another big way of, making sure you have a good cybersecurity plan for your organization. So again, you can kind of foresee that, okay, well, if this fails, we can turn off this at this particular time. We have a plan for, any type of discrepancies of exfiltration of data, other controls that might mitigate that risk in other ways.
So I want to try and be positive again and think about how we can kind of flip the question, think about increasing value to our internal and external stakeholders. MFA is great. Technical controls are great. The good old-fashioned hard work of, for example, conducting a data inventory and figuring out what you have, where it is, how you process it, who it belongs to, and what regulatory regime applies to it is absolutely key. If you can tell, for example, your customers, we keep regulatory data out of email. And if they send you something, for example, and say, no, we don't want to accept that, we keep regulatory data out of email. One, if that's true, you've lowered your risk to a huge extent. Because thinking about IMAD again, the big deal there wasn't that there was some huge attack that brought down the company. The big deal there was a silly phishing attack, and then they had a reporting duty and they got fined by a regulator. So even these tiny issues, which may be a blip from a security perspective, from an overall continuity perspective, can have withering effects on an organization. So MFA, technical solutions are key, but doing that hard work of understanding your data flows can really add value to the organization.
To know thyself is to know the enemy.
There we go. Philosophical,
right?
even.
So while we're running the last question around IDS, IPS, and SIPSOC for the virtual side of the organization, how do I motivate management to give me budget and or focus on security and incident response plans? How do I get the money?
Tabletop. So tabletop is a great exercise. If you can get folks involved, it's really going to crystallize the issue for them. And listen, if you can't get a CEO or any kind of C to the table in the tabletop, do what happens in real time. Say, okay, well, I need your time for like an hour. Sometime in that hour, we're going to call you with something coming out of our simulated incident. And we need you to decide. And then when you call them, it's going to freak them out, because when you bring them the real life scenario and they've got to make a decision in real time, they'll realize, gosh, we haven't thought about that. Okay. So if you can't get the C-suite to the table, get them involved in some fashion. I can't tell you how many times I've had folks say, okay, you have the C, whoever it is, for 45 minutes or an hour in this tabletop, and they stay for 3 hours because they realize, oh my gosh, this is actually something we need to pay attention to. And then budget follows. I mean, the good and bad news about the regulations as well is if it's in black and white, it's kind of hard to argue with. So what organizations used to put off as best practice, now being a legal requirement, that's also a good way to get the C-suite.
I haven't talked to a cyber insurance person.
Mm-hmm. We're trying to get cyber insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Find out how much their rates are going to increase this year.
Right.
That'll get them.
Yeah, but I think, overall, with that solution, I think, sorry, that's a good thought.
Getting money. How do we get money?
How do we get money?
How do we get money?
So as far as, look at the landscape of what's been happening in the news, as far as, current breaches. I mean, you can't go onto Google and go breach, and there's going to be hundreds of, different breach, notifications of, what's happening in the wild. So again, use that as far as a way of, hey, look, this isn't just, just big companies. I think even me and, Ken at one point, we're looking at breach notifications in just even different states. And I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of notifications that, you'll see throughout even the last couple of years that, is a real thing. And then also to pair with that, like a regulation, if you are needing to be like within the SHIELD Act, which is a New York State requirement around personally identifiable information, or if you are, CMMC or DOD work, there is times where you're going to need to be doing those particular things where if you're not, you might lose out contracts, right? So again, use everything in your power to show the value of, doing that within those, those cases of, real life situations, as well as maybe some other compliance that you have to meet to keep your current contracts.
So the answer to the last two questions was, does your organization have an IDS/IPS solution? About 55% of the companies represented here have a solution in place for that. Only about 40% of us have a good SIMSOC solution. So we've got 3 minutes left. That's 1 minute per person. Back in February or March, the FBI and CISA put up the Shields Up program, right? Raise the consciousness of organizations around the United States to be prepared. So, Paul, what advice would you give, to the people here today around, being prepared for that?
So I've got half a minute. Yeah, so I mean, you can't be prepared for everything. As Bruce said, tools fail. Who knows what the next step is? We're talking war and cyber war. What I'm worried about is what happens when the profit motive fails, right? The bad guys are out there for profit now, and that's kind of easy to anticipate. What if they're out there to cause damage? And I guess the real thing that we can all do is think about that scenario when everything's going to go down, have plans in place to keep the organization going, to work with your stakeholders, to work with the other folks in your ecosystem to make sure they're informed where appropriate. Just to really keep your eye on that ball, because for my clients, I am worried about what happens next when it's no longer criminals, but for example, state actors who are taking broad shots at our economy to take us down. So maybe there I ended on a very negative note. Sorry.
24/7 coverage. Got to be watching. Got to be. They're coming. There, I could tell you probably 7, 8 companies in the past 30 days in New York State that are actively under ransomware, and you got to have 24/7 eyes watching the whole entire attack surface, right? All that asset, in inventory. Got to know where everything is and be watching it.
Yeah, technologically, to look at your exterior posture, looking at your external IP addresses, maybe see if you have the ability or finding someone to do external scans against, what can a bad guy see without any information about you? They find your IP addresses, what could they get into your systems, what vulnerabilities would be seen? Again, so looking at those, looking at cyber, your cyber policy sets, making sure those are good for configurations, especially around your firewalls, right? Is your VPN good? You're using good ciphers, you're using good logging methodology and multi-factor with that. And then lastly, I think the biggest thing is business email compromise or phishing. That's usually, again, back to Paul's point, that was one of the ways that one company got in trouble, is clicking on a bad link of an email. So again, making sure that you have good control sets over your email systems to negate basically bad emails that come in, and then train your employees. Do those training exercises with them using internal systems or paid for systems. So that way, again, you're training your employees, because at the end of the day, technology can only get you so far. So training your employees to foresee those risks is only going to enrich the company to withstand those types of attacks.
Thank you to our panelists.